Mic check, please.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ducks Unlimited podcast.
I'm your host, Dr. Mike Brazier.
I'm your host, Katie Burke.
I'm your host, Dr. Jared Henson.
And I'm your host, Matt Harrison.
Welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, the only podcast about all things waterfowl. From hunting insights to science-based discussions about ducks, geese, and issues affecting waterfowl and wetlands conservation in North America. The DU Podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ducks Unlimited podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harrison, and we also have with us today co-host Dr. Mike Brazier and one of my really good friends, Seth Dortsch, and we have got some great information coming your way here in just a minute. So y'all stay in, listen, and before we hop into all these questions we have and we're going to share, I want my good friend Seth Dortsch to give us a little bit of a background of kind of who you are and also your relationship with Ducks Unlimited and kind of how that got started.
Sure. Yeah, no, thanks to you and Dr. Mike for having me and inviting me to be a part of it. You know, it's an honor when I reflect on just my relationship with Ducks Unlimited and the development since being a little kid. It would be cool to go back and tell my younger self, like, hey, we're in these experiences together.
Absolutely.
Within a community that we all love, and especially a category of wildlife and waterfowl and habitat conservation that DU is obviously leading the front on. So for me, professionally, work in the outdoors and off-road space in various capacities. A lot of it has to deal with marketing and branding and media, which is, a lot of the conversation that we'll have around today. And so I've been in my career capacity for about 7.5 years now. So, it's just as much as I'm learning, the more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know. And the more I realize how much I don't know, the more I want to learn. And so it's just that vicious cycle of learning how to be a pro in this space and in the outdoors and off-road world. Currently right now I work full-time for Rough Country, which is a aftermarket company that makes pretty much anything you can put on your vehicle, truck, auto, UTV. And then I do a lot of different partnership stuff in different capacities with, Benelli USA, Heavy Shot, media contributor for Ducks Unlimited in different capacities. And so it's incredible because I get to merge a lot of the things that I personally love about just marketing and branding and media with the lifestyle that we and so many of y'all love to live around: waterfowl hunting, conservation, science. And I'm just here to ask Dr. Mike questions about science.
I'm all answered out today.
So too many meetings, but yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at currently. And then personally, I'm a husband, I'm a father of 2 little girls, and everything kind of we talk about today, that reality for me integrates into a lot of who I am and what I do, because I consider, how do I communicate these things to my little girls as they grow up, and just like me, being a little kid, going to Ducks Unlimited banquets, and, my dad would save the DU magazines for me once they came in the mail, because even though I am younger and we're kind of the social media age, there was still a part of my life to where it was like, DU magazine and DU website was kind of where you went to get your information. Yeah. And so, I would lay in the floor and look at all the photos and read the stories and, all the different things that really fueled my passion and inspired me in a lot of ways for everything that I kind of do now. Yeah. And so, my involvement with Ducks Unlimited, as a lot of that grew and developed, I would go to banquets with my dads and steal all the DU stickers from all the tables and, all the things
slapping
like
on everything you own.
No, for sure. And through all the, I mean, I don't even know if the game is still available, but ducks.org/Green Wings, whatever the URL was, I can't tell you. There used to be a duck ID game. Is that still a thing?
I don't
Do you know?
know. I don't know. I can tell you we have a Waterfowl ID section on the Ducks Unlimited website.
But I don't know if it's a game.
I don't know if it's a game either.
So it was, it was essentially, you jump on to a game, whatever you want to call it, but it was identifying the ducks, and that I can't tell you how many times I did that.
Did you get them right though?
I would say eventually.
You better say yeah.
I would say eventually. Hey, but just like everything else, you got to get your reps in. But, I say all that to say this is, those experiences, I didn't know then. Now that I look back now, in so many different ways, that impacted my interest into ducks and waterfowling and conservation and science, and in a lot of ways as I developed the capacity to try to ask questions around this, more so ask Dr. Mike questions about science and things like that. As I got into college, I went to University of Tennessee at Martin. I was some people went into fraternity. My fraternity was Final Flight Outfitters, which is a sporting goods dealer. That was, growing up a little kid in Northwest Tennessee, that was kind of like, that's what kind of a dream to go do that. And so Final Flight is a huge, I'm pretty sure they're a lifetime sponsor now of Ducks Unlimited through many different capacities. So, I got involved in the collegiate chapter there, eventually becoming the collegiate chairman for that chapter. And, God bless Jimbo Robinson for putting up with all of us, and through all of that, it wasn't just about learning how to get people to come to a banquet, spend their money, support conservation, but for a college student, a lot of that is developing their character, developing their soft skills as a leader or somebody to step up to responsibility. To have, to go have conversations with a business or somebody that may, they may not even know, and hey, will you support our initiative that we're doing? And I can't tell you how many different, just valuable lessons that I've learned from those seasons. So yeah, I mean, Ducks Unlimited has kind of been a part of a lot of my life and in many different capacities. And now with being a media contributor, whether it's through, social media or DU Magazine, it's just an honor to have the opportunity to be to the mic, to be a part of that table to generate the messaging around DU.
Absolutely.
So I have a question here for you. We've heard a lot about kind of who you are already, but people can learn a lot more about you by going to some of your social media platforms, right?
Sure.
So just kind of go ahead and do that so people can go and see some of what you do throughout a year. So let's just go ahead and do that now.
Yep. So you can go to SethDortsch.com, or you can find me on any Insta or any social media platform at the Seth Dortsch. Feel free to shoot me a DM, and anytime you have questions, I try to be as available as possible. Which we'll talk about some of that, just the reality and challenges of working in the media space.
And so I might come back to that in terms of like, what do you do throughout the course of the year, how it changes, but I don't want to do that right now.
Sure.
Because I want to go back to some of your experiences with the DU banquet system. And so quick plug here for our event fundraising team, banquet system. If you haven't been to a Ducks Unlimited banquet, get to one. And you can find out one where there is one near you, ducks.org/event. We're coming into the hunting season. There's going to be a lot of excitement around those events. So go check those out. What was your first or most memorable sort of experience at a DU banquet?
Yep. So So I was born and raised in Milan, Tennessee. I'm not sure if Milan still has a chapter. South Gibson has a really good chapter.
If they don't, here's an opportunity for somebody to start.
Yeah. So South Gibson has a phenomenal chapter. I've been to several of their banquets in past history, especially for Final Flight. My most memorable is at the Milan banquet. They used to have a youth duck calling contest, and that's the only duck calling contest I've ever participated in. It's the only one I've ever won. So I was like, all right, we're batting 100% here.
You stopped while you were ahead?
Yeah, no, I did. Yeah.
Were you the only one in the contest?
I was not. So, and that's, if you ask my dad, he was so pumped because I can't even remember how old I was. I mean, I couldn't do, feed chuckle. No, it was just kind of the same cadence and everything. And I think I beat some dude that was like, 3 or 4 years older. So of course your dad's fired up. But what was so cool about that, and this just goes back to the DU banquets and a lot of what the initiative of Ducks Unlimited is providing exposure for people to expand at their understanding and their experiences around the culture of DU, around the things that go on. Because in those times of being a young person, I have no idea, how money is maximized for, habitat and waterfowl conservation, all that. But what I did know is there's a lot of people here that all love waterfowl hunting, and they're doing it to raise money to better take care of ducks and habitat. And, from there, I've learned, obviously have learned a lot about what that requires, all the resources it takes, and so. But yeah, back to your question, that was pretty
awesome.
Pretty cool moment. Yeah,
that's an episode in itself.
Yeah,
like with a whole bunch of people. Like, what were your favorite first memory or experience at a banquet?
Yeah,
and so very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving into our next question, and we've already talked a little bit about social media, but I want to dive in to this question that we have, and so. If you're aware of social media and your own social media platforms, you know that there are a lot of different pages, sites, groups that puts a ton of information out there, whether it be about gear, whether it be about seasons, whether it be about whatever you can think of. There is so many opinions out there, and there's so many pages that put so much information and answers out there to the general public. And so my question to you is how do we decipher where we receive our information from, and how do we listen to these certain groups or pages? How do we know, all right, this is information that, hey, I can listen to and I can believe, or look, I know for sure I don't need to be, doing anything that I'm hearing here. So how
I'm going to sit back and listen.
How do we
go read Dr. Mike's thesis?
No, I like this question. Keep going.
How do we decipher between information that is good and bad?
Yeah, man, it's a phenomenal question. I think it's continually evolving of strategy and tactics to really cipher through information. I mean, it seems as though, and it just keeps getting more. There's more and more ways to consume information, and around the social media aspect of it, because for the most part, and there's many different forms of media, whether you look at traditional media like a podcast, but what is consistently in front of us most of the time is our phones and our social media apps. And you start kind of breaking that down into, different platforms, kind of have a different purpose. For me, and this is becoming more and more, just really important to me. Like I said earlier, especially being a husband and a father, and, being a leader on the home front of cultivating 2 little girls, and to hopefully the women that God needs for them to be, that this world needs for them to be, really trying to understand how to communicate what I've learned. And I think the first thing I always look at, and I always encourage other people to look at, is, don't what I would offer is, don't go to social media to define your identity, like figure out who it's going to determine who I am, the way I use media, the way you post. I mean, then you start peeling back the layers of just perspective and, all those different things. But I think it's very helpful to look to the people or organizations that have a massive stack of evidence of who they are, what they've done and the trust that they've built. Because with anything on social media, it's community and culture. It's whether you're working for an organization, whether you're just involved in some category of interest. It's so much of it's a trust factor. For me, just in my own professional journey and personal journey, it takes time to build that trust. Whether it's your followers, whether it's the people that you do everyday life with. And so, for example, with me and as my media influence has grown and developed, you get more followers, and it's incredibly important. I constantly think about the responsibility of that, the fact that it's numbers and it's followers, but it's people. It's people that either look up to you to give them influence in their lives, to impact their decision making, whether it's around categories like waterfowling of gear and strategy and tactics and things like that. But it's also impacting their habits and behaviors, the way they perceive things, the perspective they have. For example, towards a Ducks Unlimited, there's media is kind of what you make it. If you want to go to social media and find a lot of bad things to be worried about and consumed about,
you can find it there.
It's out there. If you want to go to social media and find a lot of good people that you want to be more like, that's a lot of social media for me. Is there's a lot of men and women all together that I specifically follow for the reason of when I look at them and the way that they live their life, not just the way that they post about their life. I want to be more like them. I want to either maybe they have a skill set and an ability that I really want to develop in my own life. Maybe they communicate with, assertiveness and articulation, and they can break down stories and, all the different things. So much of it is that for me. And so, especially in the waterfowling space, it's been helpful for me because I get the opportunity to almost see that pressure as a privilege to try to communicate in a healthy way, to whether it's younger, older, whatever, but the overall space in general, the incredible things that we love about waterfowl and conservation and all the different things. On the flip side, my whole life isn't just social media.
Yeah.
So even though I don't work for Final Flight anymore, I still hunt with them a lot and still do a lot of life with them. And so, for example, having people like Kelly Powers, John A. Powers, Tripp, Ryan Graves, John Hoffman, he's a photo editor for Ducks Unlimited. He's in our hunt club. So, my brother-in-law, Tyler, having those people in my everyday life, and especially through hunting season to bring me back to perspective of relationship, and those kind of dynamics is extremely helpful. And I think in more ways it impacts me than I even know how to understand right now, and won't understand until later on down the road. So I would tell anybody, the most important thing is look to people that are living in such a way or doing the thing in such a way that you want to be more like, and you can trust that factor. And then obviously there's so many layers you can peel back on that, because then you go into a conversation like mainstream media versus social media platforms. What do you and so I don't want to go super far into all of that. Obviously we could all talk about that, but in specific for the context of this, of the waterfowling space, even of brands, it's one thing to brands have if it's a brand that has a top tier performing product, look at the way that they invest in the communities. Look at the way that they partner with organizations like a Ducks Unlimited, when their whole focus isn't just utilizing social media to gain dollars from the consumer, and then that's the transactional relationship. Making watch their behaviors, watch their patterns, and that's the way I try to live my life, and the way I try to utilize media is living it before I try to tell anybody to do it, living by example, but then also just building an undeniable stack of evidence that we are who we say we are and we do what we do. Because at the end of the day, and Dr. Mike I know can attest to this in the world of science, outcomes and results are things that are factual, and I think it's healthy to really understand how we all can build those factors in our lives.
Yeah.
The one thing that I kind of wonder, Seth, whenever I heard Matt ask that question, and I was thinking about it as I heard you respond. The one thing that I always encourage people to do is, and a lot of people don't like this, but it's really important, is always question, always
Sure.
ask questions, because you're going to be inundated with lots of different sources of information, as you've just talked about.
Right.
And I would say, encourage people to question all information in a way that's healthy,
Sure.
right? Don't just believe things on the surface. Try to understand where it comes from, as you said. Sort of try to understand the reputation of the individuals or groups that may be providing that information. And sometimes this isn't easy. You have to dig deep and
Right.
look. It's like body of evidence
doubt.
type stuff. And I don't want to get too far down on the science side of things,
Sure.
but the same thing applies. You're consuming information regardless of whatever it is that you're looking at. And there's more out there now than there ever has been. My question to you, kind of building on this, is you do that yourself. You are a source of information that people look to.
Sure.
You also look to other people and other folks in the media space or wherever else. How much do you find yourself studying, learning, adapting? How much of this is sort of with what you do and your approach to things changes in response to the questions that you're asking, and anything else that may be influencing kind of the way you're thinking?
Sure. No, it's I do it a lot in regards to my own work of seeking, looking, asking questions, and I do it in a lot of, I try to do it in a lot of different categories. And even though it's kind of irrelevant, but it is relevant. I mean, some of the ways that I operate and even decisions that I make, even in my career of the outdoors and off-road world, I consume a lot of information and content from kind of the health and fitness space. I consume a lot of content from the leadership space. And because at the end of the day, whether you peel back any of this, even for ducks and conservation, like, it's people involved in all the factors of it.
Yeah.
So it's all cross correlating. It's just, how it applies in a certain category or sector. And that's been really challenging to me, no doubt. And I think it just reminds me the purpose of holding yourself to a higher standard than anyone else will ever hold you to. So as your influence grows or whatever, as your work and skill set grows, that the character capacity that you're challenging yourself with will far exceed what anybody else will challenge you with. And that's, I've seen result after result, but that's hard because nobody's going to do it perfect. I certainly don't do those things perfect, but developing that kind of strategy and tactic, that kind of operating standards for my own self in private allows me to perform the way I do in public. And that's, because at the end of the day, none of us are just representing ourselves. When you look at social media and however you use social media and post, be mindful that you're not just representing yourself, whether it's on the personal front or the professional front, because, for the brands that I partner with, for the people I work for the communities that I spend time with. For example, me talking about our Final Flight Hunt Club, like all of those different guys, they're not all involved in the waterfowl industry, but, it's a responsibility. I'm a representation of the people that we've built around and those relationships, and all of that goes into reputation. And you can, obviously find out a lot about somebody's reputation via social media. And it's a long game. It's, it's building trust, building relationship is a long game. And there's definitely ways that you can do that in unhealthy ways and ways that you can do that in healthy ways. So it's,
and one thing I've learned too with social media in a whole, and like you said, I'm big into a lot of the same things you said: outdoor, fitness, leadership. I love all that as well. One thing, and Dr. Mike kind of hit on this a little bit, do your research too. Like, it's so easy. I can open up my phone right now and go to any platform, anything, and I can see a news release about anything. Well, if you just read it, a lot of people just believe whatever they say, and they're just like, "Oh, you won't believe. Look, this just happened."
Yeah.
Well, time out. Like, have you even?
And you got to be cautious of the terms that people use too to get your attention, right?
Clickbait. There's clickbait.
Masterful marketing.
Literally,
man.
people. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that you can say. There it could be anything. This, and this happened, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, I got to click on it." Then you read it, and you're like, "Well, that didn't happen." But that's one thing I've learned is like, okay, if I see something, it can be about anything: sports, hunting, fitness. Well, this just happened. Well, time out.
Yep.
Let me go check this source that I trust, that I know for a fact. Well, okay, they released about it, so I do believe it a lot more now. Well, let me just now go to, this category or business or whatever that it happened to, and let me see if they've released something about it. Right. Well, if they released it, okay, now I can believe it. But it's so easy, and I see it all the time. People that they take. And it don't even have to be a post. They can hear something and go straight to social media. Y'all won't believe what just happened. Like, this was just released. There's not a hunting season this year. Like, and you're like, well, where did you get
this? For
this?
the record, that's not true.
That's not true at all. That's not true. What I'm saying is, though, is there's people that take information and do zero research. They see it and believe it.
Yeah.
Right. And in this day and time, a lot of the things that said, I believe half the things that said, and I believe everything that you see. You know what I mean? Like,
there's the Jocko Willink, he, big influence in the leadership world, Navy SEAL. I've learned that, there's something they call in the military community called the OODA loop. So observe, orient, decide, and act. So it's a loop of a way that you can detach yourself from the emotional connection of whatever you just consumed, watched, experienced, and that's been phenomenally helpful for me as I try to implement that, in my life and all different, but especially with social media, observing what you've just read, what you've just consumed, orient yourself to that, just mind frame wise, and making a decision off of that information you consumed, taking an action, am I going to believe it? And am I not going to believe it? Yeah. And then running through that loop. And I think, a large part of just that social media consumption aspect, and this goes back to my point of look to people and that have done the work of building the trust by building an undeniable stack of evidence that they are who they are. And that goes, to the importance of Ducks Unlimited, this podcast. Even when, Dr. Mike and I first met, I'd obviously watched him a lot, and watched the. I'm gonna give you a huge ramp up here. Watch the way he but it's a prime example. You have a lot of influence not only in the educational world of science because of the work you've put in, the experiences you've had, the leadership that you've stepped into, but also in the world of taking complex situations, complex dynamic. Why am I not killing more ducks? What's going on with the ducks? All these different things, and figuring out ways to communicate that and packaging that for people like me that I don't have a PhD, I don't understand all the jargon, but I can consume and digest a lot of the information and the questions that you are already asking in so many different ways. And so, things like that and behavior like that is why it's so important, and the value that's added through initiatives like the DU podcast that, we're here on right now, all the different episodes, topics, things like that, that people can generally not come to and from a place of like, oh, everything Dr. Mike or whoever's on the episode says is, a truth of all ages, but generally overall, you can trust the initiative and the information that's being deployed to our minds, to our perspectives, and it's a game changer for sure.
I appreciate those comments. They make me a little uncomfortable.
That's fine. It's all good.
But I do want to say they make me uncomfortable because I you see me, you hear me just because of my association with Ducks Unlimited. It's not anything that I've done necessarily. It is because of who Ducks Unlimited is, who our following is, what our reputation is,
Sure.
and all of the information that I convey in any of the work that I do. And I'm fortunate to have this opportunity, and I do enjoy being one to help disseminate some of this information. But that information all comes from the hundreds of other waterfowl scientists,
Sure.
researchers, graduate students across the country. I'm very this role that I've kind of stepped into on sort of the communication side of things. Never really thought I'd be
Sure.
doing
Right.
this. It is people ask me a lot of times if what I think about what I find myself doing now. And it's like it has actually helped me stay engaged on a lot of topics that I ordinarily would not have
Sure.
if I wasn't doing this, because I feel an obligation to represent our organization, to represent the scientific community, the conservation community, in sharing the good work and the great information that they are generating.
Sure.
And so there is a lot of pressure that comes with that.
For
You
sure.
want to get it right. You want to give credit to the people that are actually doing it. For a lot of this, I'm just kind of a mouthpiece
And you take
on some
pride
of
in
this.
your work too.
Sure.
You know, I mean, Dr. Mike's one, and we'll just continue. We'll go down the line giving him compliments.
No,
Yeah.
this is not.
We're gonna make him really
Let's go back.
uncomfortable. Yeah, hey, you're
No.
next, everybody. But no, before I actually started working with Ducks Unlimited, I was able and fortunate enough to meet Dr. Mike.
We're
at
going to
the-
go back to the very first
We're gonna go
question that
back.
you asked
Hey,
me.
we won't dive off
What
into
was
that.
it?
We
What
won't
was
dive
it?
off into that. But,
I will.
I can hear Dr. Mike.
There was a pool table involved. I
There
can tell
was,
you that.
and a ping pong
That's
table.
right.
But no, you know, Dr. Mike, off the bat, I'd never met him before in my life. And like I said, I had the pleasure before starting working with Ducks Unlimited to meet him.
Yeah.
And of course, I had every question in the world that a waterfowler is going to have towards a waterfowl scientist. And I
Sure.
just, you know, I think my first question to him is, do you think the flight patterns has shifted? And he was like,
Here we
how
go.
much time you got?
I said, really? That's the first question you're going to come with?
It's like, I did not see that
It's
coming.
like, how many layers of the onion you want to peel back?
But, no, Dr. Mike, you know, clearly off the bat, not only is he extremely knowledgeable in waterfowl science, but he's also, like you said, has a way of explaining it to people. And I, like I said, I'm giving him his props here.
Sure.
And you know, we have this side of the podcast that we're now doing the outdoor side, but then we also have the science-based side that Dr. Mike leads, and the information there is information that, yeah, there may be, like you said, some jargon that he throws out there that you're like, whoa, that's over my head. Like,
Sure.
you got to have a PhD. I don't have one. I do have a PhD. I'm poor, hungry,
Just
and
got to
determined.
exercise that. Just got to exercise that.
My
What did you
PhD
say? Poor, hungry, and
I
what?
have a
Determined.
PhD, but I'm poor, hungry, and determined. I don't have.
That's the waterfowler's PhD.
I've never heard
my
that one.
PhD, okay? But I don't have that. But Dr. Mike does a great job of getting the information out there to anybody to understand. Now,
Sure,
like I just
100%.
shared, there are times that you may be like, I don't know what he's talking about. And there'll be times, I mean, he's a genius, but he does a great job with that side of the podcast. And I am kind of giving us a little push here is for science-based facts
Right.
when it comes to waterfowl and conservation. The DU podcast is a great, and I'm not the head of that, so I'm not, you know, Dr. Mike leads that charge, and that's a great place for you to come and get that information.
No, absolutely. And I mean, it's that, like, you know, said twice already, there's a massive stack of evidence that reveals just what this, you know, what the podcast's about, what the whole team, not just Dr. Mike, I'll plug that,
Thank
you know,
you.
the
Thank
whole
you.
time. I mean, and that's, I mean, you think it's like I said earlier, like as I've grown and developed a greater understanding of what all it takes within the Ducks Unlimited ecosystem to do what DU does, and who DU has become. I mean, it's thousands and thousands of people all throughout the states, up into Mexico, you know, up into Canada, down into Mexico, that are on that front of, I mean, so many moving factors.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, and that's, I mean, information wise, and that's why I kind of brought it up, is just the fact of having the DU podcast, having that information, having, you know, somebody with the ability to kind of figure out how to communicate and articulate the information, but somebody that actually really cares. And that's, even as you unpack social media, man, there's a lot of people. For example, Kelly Powers, I get to spend a lot of time with him, get to hunt with him a lot. I mean, one of the most phenomenal, just innovative people that I know, and he's really not on social media at all. A lot of it, he does stuff for, his work or, Higdon Outdoors TV, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But other than that, he's really behind the scenes. And, there's so many people that I spend time with. I mean, for example, there's so many scientists out there that are a part of the DU organization that, they're not the media front, but so much of the work that they're doing and the value they're adding to the people around them and to the end state of the results for Ducks Unlimited, it's all a part of that, all a part. So, sometimes as I realize the responsibility of my media influence and that kind of pressure is a privilege dynamic, sometimes I'm just like, man, but really, you're the one I want people to be coming to for like heavy information. People like KP, he's the one I want to be talking to people about like, hey, here's your strategy and tactics on how to be really effective. So I take it, all these different people that I spend time with, and especially for all of us in media, it's a responsibility of ours to bear in a really incredible way to be the primary communicator for all those many people that have put in the work, invested in us, invested in this organization, in the research, in the development, all the things. Yeah. And, I definitely don't take that lightly, just like y'all do.
For sure.
So,
well, moving on, continuing to talk about media. I want you to elaborate a little bit, and you actually did a little bit earlier, whether you know it or not, about the do's and don'ts of social media. And you talked a little bit about your
don't be stupid.
Don't be stupid. It's as simple as that. Don't be stupid.
Photos last a long time.
Man, especially if you get in politics.
Yeah. But you talked about, what you represent. You represent more than yourself, right?
Yeah.
And especially for somebody like yourself or myself, Dr. Mike, we represent a lot of things, so we have to be extremely careful.
Right.
But let's say we're talking, and this is all made up, but let's say we're talking to a 16-year-old, high school boy that's wanting to get involved. They want to be a Seth Dortsch. Okay?
Sure.
What are the do's and don'ts of the social media and media world? Because we know, like you just said, like once it's out there, buddy, it's out there.
Right.
And it's going to stay out there. You can take it down. You can delete it. You can trash it. You can delete it from your deletes. But once it's out there and it's been seen,
Sure.
insane. And that goes with anything. I'm not saying, that's good, that's bad, that's the good, bad, and ugly.
Right. It's just reality.
But the do's and don'ts of social media are so important if you're wanting to get involved, because I know even from kind of part of my job here at DU, when we have to do certain things with certain groups, we have to look. You have to be careful. You have to, this day and world that we live in. You can't just go, hey, come be a part of this. Come do this. We want you here. We want you there. We want you speaking on behalf of Ducks Unlimited. Well, time out. We got to research, right? But how important is that, and how do people realize? And like you said, just don't be stupid. It's almost as simple as that. But
that's all relative now.
Yeah. What are those do's and don'ts? And I'm going to say this, I'm going to turn over to you.
Yeah.
I tell a lot of people this. If you have to think about should you or should you not post it, don't.
Sure. It's a good guardrail.
If you have to sit there and say, should I post this? Don't.
Yeah.
Don't. So I'm going to turn over to you. What are the do's and don'ts of media?
So in regards to do's, and just talking to anyone that's listening, especially if you're a younger generation, you're coming up, you're seeing everything that we are all operating in every day, in the current state of industries or communities and things like that. The do's of how incredibly, it's one thing. Yes, social media. Important factors are, your reach and your followers and the level of content that you kick out or post or the way you post it. Yes, those are all like non-negotiable important factors of social media, but I can't stress enough the importance of the do's of social media is who you surround yourself with, developing your character capacity to realize, okay, in anything with social media, you're putting yourself out in whichever layer or extent of who you are into the public world. Anybody, can say anything about it. Like that's for us in the United States, like that's freedom. Anybody can have an opinion about what you said. So developing your ability to understand your why you want to be involved in it, why you want to either be involved in, waterfowling or the posts that you make, whatever it is. It's definitely a process of deciphering who to listen to, the feedback you get and the feedback that you need to neglect or just disregard. And so I think that's some of the most important do's. We could do a whole podcast on, posting strategy and the type of content and, what content to post on what platform, whether you go from TikTok, Instagram, the meta world, LinkedIn. Even for me, I'm active on all these platforms. So even though I may utilize similar content, the way that I strategize how I communicate it is a bit different, whether it goes from LinkedIn, which is a little bit more professional aspect to it compared to Instagram, which is a little bit more like really community focused, whether it's TikTok to where, you could have a post that just blows up and gets millions of views. That's what happened to me. And it was a lot of, processing. How do you respond to this? How do you utilize it? That kind of stuff. The don'ts is, just
don't be stupid.
It's
a long list.
It's a simple way. But the unfortunate thing, and I think about, the unfortunate thing is a lot of people don't know what is stupid and what is not, in current, in current, and, in current times. I think this all goes back to the do's and don'ts, I think are impacted by who you're surrounding yourself with, who you're looking to in the waterfowl space, who you're hunting with. Like, if you're doing illegal stuff with people and you're posting about it, that's definitely a don't. Yeah. Like, it's like a no factor. It's I think the do's and don'ts really come down to just a lot of human behavior and trying to better develop yourself. If you're wanting to work in media or in the waterfowl space in a professional capacity, or if it's just a personal pursuit that you enjoy and you want to post a pile pic all the time, like that's cool. Like you do you. But on the factor of on a professional aspect, there's just, I wouldn't say there's like right and wrong. It's just what's the most advantageous strategy I can develop to make myself an asset to who I work for, who I'm with, who I'm around, and those factors. Yeah. So
okay, how important? You talked about all that you're doing there, all that you're thinking in terms of engaging on different platforms from a personal standpoint for your mental well-being. How important is it to get away from all of that?
It's very important. I definitely have my own protocols, I guess as you would say, in regards to just in a 24-hour day, for my standard day, I'm usually up like 3:45, 4 o'clock because I've got two little girls.
In the morning?
Yeah. So so this has been a requirement of me like past 2 months. So, Lucy, which is my oldest, she's waking up. So I try to work out before. So like my workout time is like no media. I'm using that time, obviously, one, to build myself physically, keep myself healthy, but I'm also processing a lot mentally about whether it's preparing for what's going on in my day. And social media, like the thing about social media and the amount of information that comes in, so much of it can be just a distraction. Is it really fueling effective decision-making and human operation, whether it's personally or professionally, or is it just distracting us from being present in our everyday lives. And it's like I told Matt earlier, you know, at the end of the day, when I come home and I park the truck in the driveway, like, you know, my wife and my girls, they don't need a public figure. They need a very present father and husband. And, you know, knowing when to dial that down and when to dial it up. And just as I talk about it, I'm in that process of learning more and more about it, about how I need to shift dynamics, just knowing where I'm at. And especially in a world of where it's just like, you know, just grind it out, put in the work. Like, yes, that is incredibly important. But just like any top level fitness performance person will tell you, if you want to perform at a high level, you have to learn how to rest. You have to learn how to process. You have to, learn just yourself. And the more that you learn yourself, the more you can help other people learn about themselves. It's kind of like, you know, I don't know who coined it, but you can only take people as far as you're willing to go yourself. And so, you know, it all impacts your media consumption, because you could spend all day long just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And, but how is that moving the needle in your life? You know, I always want to, you know, amplify the benefit of media. And I mean, it would be one thing for me to, like, you know, bash media and talk about it, but because of media, I have a career and I have, you know, the responsibilities that I do. I mean, relationships like this, but on the flip side, just like with anything else, it can take over people's lives and negatively impact who they are. So I definitely try to challenge myself before I challenge anybody else to learn ways and protocols to give yourself space from it. Give yourself time to process information that you're seeing, and that's, you know, even in the creative process, that's very helpful.
Even like you just said right there, even on the creative side, if you don't take those breaks and refresh and recharge, that's, you know, prior to coming on with DU, that's what I did full time, was content creation, photographer, videographer. Man, if you just constantly never shut off, and I'm not saying don't be ambitious and don't never stop, but what I'm saying is if you don't ever shut your brain off, it's tough to keep your creative juices flowing, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And that's what I found myself, you know, sometimes, whether it be a day, it may be half a day, but just to recharge, get away from it, all right, then restart, refresh, and recharge. So, you know, finding that balance is tough. It can be really tough, but it's important, especially in the content creation world.
So I got a question for you. When you said shut your brain off, you know, is important. It's very tough for me to shut my brain off.
Sure.
Very tough.
But when it is easy for me to do it is when I'm hunting.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're hunting,
brings many challenges.
For you, that's right.
Yeah.
How do you balance that? How conflicted are you on the fact that, man, this is what got me into this business? I mean, my passion is in hunting and being in the outdoors, but now you have an obligation to do content creation while you're there, because given the role that I find myself in, when I am hunting, I find myself temporarily thinking about, well, should I do this? Should I do that? Or could this be something that our organization could use? But I'm like, man, this is really my time. I don't want to give that up. Because for me, that's when my brain shuts off and I just go back to being a teenager. And I love that. But for you.
Yeah. Well, it's a great question. It's always going to be a challenge in some form or fashion. Yes, I have learned and I am learning different ways to mitigate kind of that impact. So maybe I'll go on a hunt and I may take like some iPhone photos or some videos, but no camera gear, just going in, choosing the mentality of like, okay, I'm here for this experience, and not trying to think about how to maximize that experience for all the work related things that, yes, it's good. And I need, I definitely default towards, okay, what type of content are we getting? How's everybody dialed in? Like, are we doing everything right? All the different things. But, and that's been a big struggle in a lot of different ways. But I'm thankful for that struggle, because it's a reality, and I've kind of had to learn this mentality and just remind myself I'm thankful for that struggle and that kind of just tension, because it's a reality that I'm getting to do work around a lifestyle and around these spaces that I so thoroughly love and enjoy. And so now, that's on me to find ways to kind of help mitigate and, not lose the passion and the love for the thing while you're making, a career off that thing. And so, that's definitely important to have some hunts, to have some experiences to where it's not just so performance demanding, while at the same time, like, I'm ready to rock with some performance down there.
It's probably not unlike the conflicted nature that a lot of outfitters live in.
For sure.
Because they probably got into that, almost certainly got into that profession because they love to hunt or fish, were really good at it, and they wanted to share that with other people and make a life out of it. But then it becomes their job, and so it's probably really important for them also to take time to themselves and just get back to what it was that they were really connected with.
Yeah, you definitely have to remind yourself of your why. Why you got into it, what led you into it. I mean, and even conversations like this are always good reminders to me of all those. When you're a young person and you have these experiences, your mind frame isn't, okay, what position am I in this company, or what partnership do I have? What content do they need? How am I going to frame this up on social media, or what platform? It was all in that experience, and, reminding yourself of that mentality. And even as we all grow older, we can still develop and intersect that mentality into the work and the performance that is required of us, that is expected of us, and that we all, I know for us three, we want to be a pro at. And so, it's just a process in itself, just like anything else.
No doubt.
So,
well, Seth, man, it has been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for all the really good information you have put out there. I know that I enjoyed it, and also our listeners and watchers. Dr. Mike, thank you so much for being a part. Man. It was a great podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in to the Ducks Limited podcast.
Thank you for listening to the DU Podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit ducks.org/DU podcast. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of Ducks Unlimited. Until next time, stay tuned to the Ducks.